Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find the links in the podcast description. 4 other podcasts: Meditation Podcast, Learn Polish Podcast, Awakening Podcast, and the Crypto Podcast, and all can be found on roycollin.com. Today, my guest, looking forward to this because I've got some juicy questions. Please welcome Brad Montgomery.
Well, first of all, this is the Learn Polish podcast, right? Am I confused? I'm kidding. Dude, I'm so glad to be
here. Let's start teaching you some Polish.
I'm very glad to be here, and I'm dying to know what the juicy questions are because I got juicy answers.
Excellent. So you might let the listeners know, first of all, who's Brad?
Well, I live in Denver, Colorado in the United States, and I am a professional motivational business speaker. So that means I work for organizations who are looking to hire a speaker. That means I don't have my own events. I don't sell tickets to my events. I work for clients who say, we've got an event, we've got a meeting or a conference. We need somebody to keynote it or close it or open it. And if I'm lucky, I'm that guy. And my expertise is social and emotional support as it relates to success and sales and healthcare, and really as it relates to whoever's in those seats at that moment. I've been doing this a long time. This is 30 years, never having a job, meaning my entire adult life has been spent in front of audiences. Right now I'm a speaker, but I started out doing comedy and magic. So even before I was speaking, I was on stage.
Yeah, I've seen that you've done 12 years doing comedy and magic, and I wanted to actually touch on that. But prior to that, I mean, obviously, I've seen a lot of the speeches that you've done. I look at a lot of the videos, and you've spoken in front of massive audiences. And I just love your style, which, the humor, but with a message. But who was Brad as a young boy? Were you always the kind of class clown and just confident, or did you have to work on that?
Yeah, I was that guy. It's kind of embarrassing. Maybe it should be a badge of honor, but I was that guy.
We all need one of them in the class. It makes school a lot more enjoyable.
I remember as a little kid learning this magical secret, and it went like this: if I was in trouble, my mom was going to give me a talking to. But if I could make her laugh, it was over, right? Like she wasn't mad anymore. And I think as an adult, I realized she was frustrated. Like, dang it, this kid made me laugh again. And then she cracked it. But, I think as an early kid, I did learn some value to being able to make people laugh on purpose.
And I think to realize that at an early age, because we have two emotions. We can't be angry and happy at the same time. And you were able to figure out, make my mom laugh. She can't be angry at me. And it's the exact same for every single person that we communicate with.
Yeah, they're opposites, aren't they? It reminds me of how I feel like almost every funeral, or at least party after the funeral I've been to, there's laughter, at least the good ones. Because it's exhausting being in a heavy emotion for any amount of time. So that contrasting emotion is even more powerful when it whips you out of that misery or that angry or the whatever.
Absolutely. And that's an Irish thing. I always find that, and sometimes we find it strange, but there's definitely humor after, you come away from the funeral. I know sometimes we go to the pub and we're getting drunk, and maybe that's the reason, but there's definitely, I think it's releasing the stress, because, when there is that, you're stressed, and especially if there's somebody close to you. But at the end of the day, I suppose we're celebrating death instead of actually being depressed about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that laughter is such a strong thing. I remember, God, you and I got into it fast. I remember the day that I laughed really, really hard. The first day after the pandemic, or it was during the pandemic, but I hadn't laughed at least hard for months, and we were just busting it up, and because of it had been so long, it was so powerful, and I still remember it. Humor works, people.
Definitely. And I've actually noticed that with one of the podcasters that I listen to, he does a solo cast, and I could see that he wasn't himself during the last 2 years, but when things started opening up, and you could see the humor coming back in him and everything. So I think no matter what happens, make sure you stay close to people and just laugh away, and don't be thinking of the doom and gloom. Look at the bright side of life.
Yeah, but yes, and you're 100% right. And at the risk of being that annoying guest who's disagreeing with you, it also, like, what doesn't work in the study of happiness and the study of humor is we can't force it, right? So saying to ourselves or to audiences, hey guys, the glass is half full, everything's great, just focus on the good part, doesn't necessarily help, because we have to acknowledge the glass half, the empty part, or we're crazy, right?
Absolutely. And I think sometimes people don't realize that we're kind of looking for this utopia where we're constantly happy. Life is a roller coaster. And I know you talk on the stage and you're acknowledging, the people in the audience, their mindset and where they are and what they've been through. And not every speaker can do that. Like I've kind of looked at some of your stuff, and I just like the style that you've done. You might talk me through your journey, because Brad now compared to Brad 30 years ago, what would you learn that you could share with people that are on the 30-year journey, that are just starting off?
I love that question. One of my the way I would rephrase that question, just because I love the cocktail party game where you say to your buddies, if you could go back 5 years in time and talk to yourself 5 years ago, what would you say? Or 10 years or 20 years ago? Because the answers are really cool. There are so many things I would have done differently. The biggest advice I would have given myself on the business side was to be a better speaker. Meaning, and let me explain. This business is complicated. There's a lot of things to do besides stand on stage and yammer at people. And I spent a lot of time with all of those other things, worrying about websites, and prior to websites, worrying about the printed material that we have to send out, and what is your elevator speech, and what's your business card look like, and who are you calling every day to ask for work. And it worked out for me because I've had a good career. But I wonder what would have happened if I would have gone back in time and said, Brad, forget all that crap. Just focus today, or, for the next year, on only making your speech amazing. Like, spend all day long on your opening. Is your opening good enough? Then what is the paragraph you're going to do after that opening? And is this middle story you've been doing for 4 years, is it really that good? Or are you just doing it because it's pretty good and the audience seems to like it? And what I know to be true is, if I would have, as a much younger man, if I would have invested on just making the product that I'm selling better, I think it would have been a way easier career.
I think
That's not
that's
what you expected to hear, is
no,
it?
no, it's not. And do you know, like, what I love about actually this podcast is I've interviewed over 150, probably 200 with the backlog, that everybody has something different, and I think that is. I haven't heard that being said, and I think it is probably gold, because the amount of time people spend trying to get everything right, they take their eye off the ball. Because if you do what you had said and make a fantastic speech, that's your marketing, because people come up to you afterwards and they go, I want you in my company. I want you as a personal coach, or whatever you're doing. It's like, so I think it's, excellent.
It's all about what you do on stage. I can't tell you. I'm lucky in that I'm fairly visible, and entry level speakers contact me and say, what do I need to know? And then if I start to tell them that, make your program better, no one ever says thank you. What they say is, oh no, my program's really good, I just need the marketing part. I need to figure out how to write this book, or and I'm like, well, you're an idiot. I mean, I love you,
It just
but
went
you're an
straight
idiot.
over their head. You just gave them a gold bar and they dropped it to look for a penny.
I think part of that, I'll see what you think. I think it's ego. The reason I couldn't have done that then is I had too much ego. And also, you do have some positive feedback. When I was younger, I wasn't that horrible. So people clapped at the right time and occasionally stood up and clapped and laughed. And so I wasn't horrible, but that got in my mind. Like, I couldn't see that it could be better. I thought I was doing well.
Yeah, I know that when I was doing the Toastmasters speeches, I mean, there was times I'd done competitions and I could see, wow, the difference between going from the first version to getting into the final of, you know, a few countries, it was like, whoa, why don't I do that all the time? And then I just got so kind of cocky. Like I could just do a speech on a whim, and, you know, if the person didn't turn up, yeah, I'll do a speech. But and someone called me out on it. They said, look, yeah, we know you could do a speech, but it's not your best. And then I intentionally, yeah, and then I kind of acknowledge it, because I don't let the ego get in the way. I mean, maybe 10 years ago, I'd have probably given him a clatter, but, you know, that side of me was gone. And I remember the next speech, I was like, I need to really pull up my socks here. And
Yeah.
there's a few of them came after me and they said it was my best speech ever. And it was kind of,
Oh,
yeah, you know, it's like being so conscious that don't give a half-ass speech. Don't just kind of do it. If you're going to do it right.
right. Well, I love Toastmasters and have a lot of respect for Toastmasters. But I think one of the problems with Toastmasters is there's that focus on rehearsal and, you know, choreographing every gesture, and that time you turn your head to the left and making sure you modulate your voice correct. And sometimes I think it's overdone, and we can see Toastmaster speakers, because I look at them like, oh, you're over prepared, and we can all tell. But by contrast, what they told you and what I would have told myself is exactly right. Like, no, practice. Pick one speech, get it right, get that one paragraph right. So there's that balance between having it, you know, striving for excellence and still not letting the audience know you have said that sentence the same way many times.
Yeah, and it's the one thing that with the Toastmasters, because I was about 4 years in it, and I could see people that, you know, the hair flicked at a certain time,
Yeah.
everything. And yet I'd speak from that, and I just, like, my speech would be totally different the next time or whatever, but still making sure the message is across, not just me, but I'd see others. And unfortunately, the judges were going with this criteria. At times you were seeing the wrong people that were winning, and somebody that was actually a fantastic speaker, but not doing it rehearsed to a T, which is, you know,
Right.
I can sometimes see somebody and I go, definitely they've gone through the Toastmaster journey and they didn't really, you know, deviate
Yeah.
from that or learn from it. So yeah, totally.
Well, I would think your approach to be exactly right. Have a speech that you're practicing over and over again and striving for excellence, but also it sounds like you're really good at just making it up. And when you're in front of a paying audience, having, you know, both skills are important.
No, exactly. And if something happens, it's the guy that has everything rehearsed to a T. He starts panicking and needs to start again. Whereas the person that just is just doing it and can adjust. If someone's phone rings or somebody starts shouting in the middle of the thing, they can actually incorporate into their speech.
Yeah. I remember seeing this speaker once. And she was telling this tragic story about her journey through cancer. So she's a cancer survivor. This was a very story. And at some point she got lost in her own story, meaning she hold on, and she was trying to remember where she was, and it was the weirdest thing to me, because I'm like, well, you might have forgotten how you normally phrase that, but you were there in the hospital, so maybe you could just reach back in your memory and tell us what happened next. And the fact that she didn't see that obvious thing, like, oh right, this is my story, I can tell it, just was a major hint that she was on the wrong track.
No, yeah, I've seen plenty of that. So
I think, for the record, I just mocked a cancer survivor. I think I might be. That's it. I'm over. Canceled.
no, you were actually helping them, because you know that there's a lot of the listeners and they become speakers after going through the journey, and you're actually basically saying, don't have your speech written verbatim, speak from your heart. And that's basically the advice
Well, it's
that you
two
were giving.
things. I'm not horrified if you've got it written out, if you're able to, but the just no goal is the audience better not know you've had that written out. If the audience knows you've memorized that thing, you're just a bad speaker.
Yeah, exactly. So with the kind of comedy and magic that you done, I think you've done it from 1990 to 2002. Like, I love magic, to be honest, which I started teaching my son, because I was extremely shy, so I didn't start speaking till no Toastmasters in, I don't know, 2017 or something like that. Like, so 5 years ago, just, yeah, you know.
Whoa.
And I mean, seriously shy, like, you know, so I didn't want my son to be like that. and magic. I was doing magic with him and everything, and I just love magic, and it makes you confident without even realize what you're doing, because you're basically entertaining and you're having fun, but at the same time you're getting comfortable on stage.
Yeah, magic is an interesting thing if you look at it from a perspective as a speaker, as a comedian. Because typically when we're little kids, you read a book and it says, "Here's what you do with your hands," and then it also says, "Here's what you say with your mouth." Or if you go to a magic store and you buy some sort of prop, it says, "Here's what you do with this prop, but also here's what you say with your mouth." And that's pretty helpful when you're first beginning, because now you know what to say. But at some point you realize I sound like I'm reading a script written by somebody else. And it's, by the way, the same script that everybody who does this magic trick does. So I sound like a robot. So it's great if you're a beginner. Like, there's no problem. I love magic. Memorize the words that somebody else wrote. But at some point I realized, like, oh, you can't you can't get past that level doing you saying the same crap that everybody else says. So it's an interesting thing where I think it's such an advantage. Just like you said, if you're nervous in front of a crowd, no, you don't have to write a script, learn it. But dang it, it also fascinated me that you get stuck at some point. And that happened to me, where I was doing the same magic tricks that everybody else on the planet was doing, and I was doing the same way, and I was more or less using the same script. And I luckily got to a certain point where my career um, reflected that, meaning I couldn't get past it because I was just a magician. I was like a commodity. It literally, any magician could have done what I did, literally with the same words. And I kind of had an epiphany, like, oh, I am dead ending because I'm doing this same crap. I need to think about magic in a whole different way. So it's my way to say I think magic is a total gift for people who are introverted and shy, because of all those great reasons. And it's great practice because you have sort of an excuse of why you're on stage. You don't have to just stand up and say, "Look at me." You're saying, "Stand up, let me show you something interesting." But man, I can't tell you how many professional comedians, magician, or speakers have been stuck. They just never get past that thing and never see. And I wish, let's talk about going back in time. I wish some of my magical mentors, people that were grandparent-ish to me, would have told me much earlier, "Brad, you're doing fine with the magic, but now you need to you need to erase everything that anybody has ever written. And you need to be looking for different tricks that not everyone else is doing. And definitely you need to be not using the same words as anybody." Because it's kind of embarrassing how late I came to that conclusion. It
Yeah.
was like a handicap.
Yeah, nice. Like I remember like teaching my son that you can do the trick, but you can kind of entertain people so much more by, and I was playing around with that. So he actually learned, how to actually do a trick and do different ways of talking about it. And there's so much power to that.
Yeah, that makes me think you're a good dad.
Yeah, love my son and my eldest daughter. She's in uh, Abu Dhabi as a teacher. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So
Well,
did you ever do open mic? Did you, or like comedy to work on the comedy, or was it always just through your own kind of events that you built it?
yeah, I did open mic, but not as much. And I'll tell you why. Because I was doing magic also. So when my comedian peers were going to workshop their stuff on Tuesday nights in the empty club, open mics are just god awful because you're only performing for comics, and the room empties because as people do their set, they leave. So at the very end, there's no one there. But I wasn't doing that because I was doing magic at a very small level. So I often wonder if this was like a superpower or a kryptonite. I was getting paid very little money as a magician, but it was way more than the money I would be getting paid for free to work out in comedy clubs. And I thought I was a badass. Like, oh, these comics, they're idiots. They're standing here. They're going to be here late tonight. I'm going to go over there and work for $200 and get paid. But again, had I gone back in time, I would have loved to know what would have happened had I considered those comedy clubs school, which I never really did. And just sat there and say, "This is how you get better. This is how you craft each sentence. You need to learn from these people that are better than you." Because instead I was, a stupid young adult thinking, "Well, I know better than them. I'm going to make $150 by going over there." maybe in the long run, that was the most expensive $150 I ever made.
Yeah, right. I mean, we all have our own journeys, and yeah, like whether you're looking at when you're on the open mic, just going, that didn't work. Let's try it this way. Let's try that. But just be sitting in the room for the night and just looking at the others and extracting the best part of them. And it's the same on stage, actually. That's like if I'm at an event or whatever, and you see someone doing something, you go, oh, I like the way he done that. You know, it's his, like
Right.
somebody recently was just talking about the bottle of water. Like a lot of people, you know, they have the bottle of water and they're drinking away. And he was just saying the guys are doing it intentionally just so people have time to reflect on what they've just said. You know, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. They think they're just having a bottle of water and they're drinking, but there's, you know, a lot of things that you can actually learn from the experienced people.
Well, that looking back, one of the coolest things I did was just work in comedy clubs, because if I would be in the American comedy clubs, there's usually an opener, which is the lowest status level, and then there's a middle guy has a little more status and more time, and then we're really there to see the headliner who's going to do the most time. But I did a lot of opening and middling, and that meant I got to watch top comics do 7 shows a week. That was good school. Because, you know, I was here and they were there. They weren't just a little bit better than me. They weren't mildly better than me. They were way better than me. And I just thought that was fun. I still miss that. I would love. It's harder as you age, and my job has changed. But I would love to go work 7 shows in a comedy club again. Just to, if not for nothing else, to watch somebody else do 7 shows.
Yeah, I suppose you could always incorporate it when you're traveling around and go, I'll try to get a comedy show in, you know, as a kind of reward to yourself on the next day or prior to the recording. So I know you're doing a lot of keynotes. That's kind of a big thing. So you might kind of tell us how you structure your keynotes, because everybody seems to do it a different way.
Oh, well, that is such a particular question. It's been such a long time since I've talked about that. Well, I work hard to not make it feel like everyone else's keynote. So what I think the typical keynote structure is you say, here's what my keynote is, and it's got 3 pillars. And then you tell what the first point is that you want to make, and you tell a story or 2 in support of that story or that pillar, and say, got it, that's the first pillar. Now the second pillar, and then we do that same thing, right? We support the second pillar, and then support the third pillar, and then we conclude and say, well, so now you got the 3 pillars. That's my time. You can see that happen with entry-level speakers sometimes. You're like, oh, I see how organized you are, and that's lovely. And in some ways, it's very satisfying for the audience to have it that structured, where the audience knows exactly where you are, because you've kind of drawn a map and you're pulling them down the map with you. But it's not very surprising. So I used to do that, and I still do in many ways, where I'm very clear on what is my point and how am I going to support that. But I'm way less clear. Like, I don't have 3 points anymore. I pretty much have 1 point in my current keynote. I have a really straightforward message that you could write down on a 3x5 note card and hand to everybody and just say, we're done. That's the idea. But I'm convinced now that what they really love is that support. They love all of those things that make them care about that idea, and they love all the things that make them understand that idea. But mostly, I think, as I've aged, what I'm onto now is what they really want to do is feel something about that idea. And as a motivational speaker, I think it's getting them to feel something that is where the movement is, because they can understand it and nothing happens. And they can understand the tactics and the intellectual side of it, and nothing happens. And what we're after is something happening. We want behavior change. We want them to feel like, I know the idea, I care about it, I feel like I care about it, and I feel like I know not only what to do, but that I want to do something. That's behavior change. So I've kind of scrapped it all and just said, here's my big idea. And then I have a few variations, but really it's just story after story after story in support of one idea. And me constantly saying, yep, see, it's in support of this one idea. Yep, it's in support of this one idea. What That's working great for me right now. And as a younger speaker, you would have killed me if you would have said you're going to have one idea and support it the whole way through. Like, one idea, how boring is that?
Yeah, well, that's
But
brilliant, because people, when you're constantly referring back, they'll remember it. They'll remember the stories that you're given and the humor that you're incorporating around it.
plus, we see the opposite mistake happen, or entry level speakers, especially if they have a long time, like 45 minutes or an hour or 75 minutes, 90 minutes. They're like, oh, well, here's the 19 things we're going to cover today. And the audience ends up with 0 of them. They don't gather any of them. So, I'm like, nope, here is my idea. I'm going to hit you over the head until you care about it. So that means the hardest part of my keynote might be making it feel fresh, because you don't want the audience to feel like, oh, brother, for crying out loud, we'd already talked about this. He must be done by now.
Excellent.
So that's a long way to say
Oh,
the
no,
structure of my keynote is not very, it's not typically structured. It's not bam, bam, 3 pillars: support, intro, and conclusion.
See, hence what I said prior to that is like everybody seems to have a different way of doing it. That's the first time I've heard it like that as well, and I love your idea, because I think it's actually brilliant, especially for motivation. You're getting the message home. At the end of the day, you want them to leave and actually do something instead of being all excited and that's the end of it. They go home and revert back to who they were.
Well, because motivational speaker is such a dumb phrase. I don't even know what it means. I am one, and I don't even know what it means. Because it's pretty hard for one human to motivate another human, especially if they're not coming and asking for motivation. So I'm not like, it's a weird job title. But now if you say, well, forget that, Brad, your job is to get an audience to care about something in a way that makes them say, yeah, you know what? That appeals to me. I need to do that more. That is less intimidating than I will motivate them or whatever. I guess it's just language, right?
Yeah. So I know you do MC, and like I remember checking, is there such a word as a person that do MCing? It sounds kind of like a strange word, but apparently it does exist. So I mean, it's slightly different. You're kind of hosting the master ceremony of an event. So you might kind of talk us through when you do that.
Yeah, the MC stuff is fascinating to me, because if you have those skills, it feels like you don't have a job. Meaning it doesn't seem that hard, because you're out there, you're on stage for such a short amount of time, like maybe 2 minutes or something like that, which is crazy. So, and 1 minute is taken up saying, well, that was speaker 1. Thank you very much. Didn't speaker 1 do a terrific job? And then another part of it is going to be to say, here comes speaker 2. They're going to be fabulous. Let me tell you about speaker number 2, which gives you sometimes very little time in between. So the question becomes like, so what in the hell are you doing there? And I think I really in my head when I was younger, like, well, what is my job? But now I think my job is just to say, oh, they just want me to go up and be me. Like, I'm pretty upbeat and I'm pretty lighthearted. And that's what they really want, is someone just to go up there and break the energy and connect with the audience and say, how you doing? Is everyone okay? Are you ready for the next one? And actually mean it. That is enough to be a reasonable MC. And then because I have a background in comedy and even magic, I might be able to add some material where I just tell a quick anecdote, or maybe do even a very short trick, or some piece where you get the audience involved in a very quick way. But the short answer is, I think they just want you to go up and have a personality, make it a pleasant personality, and then make it a predictable personality where they're glad to have you back. Like, he's back again. He was here an hour ago. He's back. Oh, we always like it when he comes, because he's a little bit bubbly than most of the speakers. He's a little bit more lighthearted. And for a bonus, if you're able to reflect back to the audience what's going on, you get extra credit. And let me explain. So if speaker 1 is related to speaker 2 in some way, and you are able to make that connection for the audience, the meeting planners love you. So you say, did you guys notice how speaker 1 said this, and then speaker 2 said the same darn thing, but they use different language? Bam, we're killing it at this conference. And they love that. And then if for further extra credit, if you can make that connection and then mock it in some small way, where you say, speaker 1 talked about speaker 2, and you celebrate it first, but then say like, so really, I guess we didn't need speaker number 2 because they said the same thing. No, I'm kidding. He was great. The audience loves that too, where you're able to, as long as you're always celebrating the speakers, if you can poke fun at the speakers and what they just said and how they fit into the larger part of the day, that makes it more fun as an MC. But the audience likes that too. And if the audience likes it, the meeting planner loves it.
So I know that you've worked for a lot of large corporations, IBM, McDonald's. I've listed different ones. BP. When you're doing events for that, like, is it normally like as the let's say the happy speaker instead of the motivational speaker? we're trying out the motivational speaker. Is it that they create events bringing you in, and there's a lot of different speakers? Is it just that it would be you would be the main speaker for that?
Yes and no and yes, and what that means is it kills me that it's never the same. The business model, I feel like I should know it by now. Like, I know exactly what to expect. I never know. So, like, for example, some of those credits are for some leadership team at a big company. So, like, I worked for British Petroleum. It's a nice thing to be able to brag about. But really, it was a room of 250 risk assessment advisors. Like, they were some hotshot leaders. But I didn't speak for their whole company. They brought in some leaders to teach my content over the course of 3 days, and at some point in the middle, they said, we need someone like Brad to bring that group together, but also to put a human side on some of this high tech, high content stuff. So almost always they've got a pre-existing meeting, and they're saying, wait a minute, this is too heavy, or no one is talking about the people side of this very heavy topic. We're only talking about the technical side. Or maybe it's just we think we're going to waste it, meaning if we give them too much content for too long, their brains will tune out because adults cannot learn that way. So we need someone to break this up. And that's where I come in. That's a first typical client where they have so that might be a training event where they bring in people from across the country or across the globe to put them in the same room to teach them something. Or sometimes it's a networking event where people are working remotely. That sounds familiar. And they know each other, but they don't really know each other. So let's put them in a hotel for a weekend or whatever. And so that type of event for one organization. But the other type of events I do are associations. So, in case if you're like me 25 years ago, you need to know there's an association for everything. Every industry has an association, and every subsection of that industry has an association, and those are valuable. So that means if you need to learn more about your part of your job, it's very common for your employer or even just yourself to say, I need to fly myself to go to that association meeting to be with other people who do my job so we can all learn together and from each other. And those are a really different feel where you're not working for an organization, you're working for an industry and all these people that don't know each other. If you go into a company, people might be sitting literally with their best friends. With an association, you have a much more diverse, kind of weird audience that still has a lot in common because they have this one connection to their industry. But it's a really different feel because they don't know each other. But I like those too, and those tend to be for me the bigger events, those big association events. They're bigger numbers in the audience, but all of them are fun.
Excellent. So I know you've been awarded Speaker Hall of Fame from the National Speakers. I have to read it here, CPAE. I mean, that doesn't mean much to me, but I know that it's a big thing what you've got. So you might just let us know what that's all about.
Yeah, that was cool. I'm a member of the National Speakers Association, and every year they pick up to 5 speakers and hand them an award and say, hey, you're in the Speaker Hall of Fame. And here's what changed in my career after earning that cool honor. Nothing. No one cares. My clients are like you. I don't know what that is. Whatever. But you know what? It was super cool. It just felt so warm to be honored by my peers and have people I look up to say, yeah, Brad, you got something going here. We really like it. And the other thing that was so neat is for the ceremony, I flew out my family, and so my wife was there, and my little kids were there, and my dad was there. And we have a bizarre job. No one knows what we do. My kids, I get on a plane and they go do it. Sometimes they see me in front of an audience, but they don't really know what I do. So that was the coolest thing, just for that one night, to have people that I care about say, "Oh, I don't really know what Brad does, but other people seem to think he's good at it." that was that was the coolest thing.
Right.
So it's a weird thing. Like theoretically, it's like winning an Oscar, only in a much smaller industry. But
so you didn't go up and clatter the guy that gave you the award, no?
no, I didn't. But it's also weird because nobody's heard of it.
And
right?
have you been involved with the Speakers Association from the start, or when did you get
Yeah,
it?
that was that was something I did right. I got into that early, and that wasn't sort of a good idea. That wasn't like, it wasn't helpful. That changed my career because this was all pre-internet. It's very hard to see good speakers. Impossible to learn from good speakers unless you happen to find one who is willing to talk to you. And really hard to get any sort of feedback on not just the onstage portion of our job, but also all of those things that we talked about earlier, all of the things you need to do in order to get hired. And suddenly I'm in an organization of people who all have that same goal. And oh man, they blew me away because they are actually teaching things in comedy and entertainment. My experience was that entertainers are more protective of everything. So I remember we talked about comedy clubs. I remember as a young crappy comic talking to the headliner saying, "Wow, you're amazing. You have to watch me because I'm right before you. If you'd be willing to coach me, or I don't even know what to ask you, but if you could help me get better, I would be so grateful." And almost always the senior comics would say, "Oh no, you're doing great." Which to me, or they would say nice set, which, was theoretically a compliment, but what it really meant was, I'm not helping you. I did it the hard way and you're on your own. And definitely there was no help of, how do you get more bookings? I don't know how to do that. No one was going to help you because entertainers kind of saw it as a closed world. And if Brad gets a job, that means they might not get it. Well, speakers don't work that way. At least this NSA has this, their metaphor is it's a pie, and we don't have to divide it up and we all get a same piece. We can make a bigger pie and all of us will get more. So that means senior speakers were totally willing to take me under their wing and say, "Oh, Brad, you don't understand this yet, do you?" And I remember having two senior speakers. I had a preview video in order to get hired. And this is a constant nightmare in our job. Re-editing your video, trying to make a video that works, and having two senior speakers look at it and say, "Oh, Brad, this video is horrible, but I can tell you exactly what you need to do." That was just insanely important advice. Those people resources that, like I said, they changed my career.
Excellent. No, brilliant.
Plus, they have big conferences. It's similar to Toastmasters in that way. You go to conferences and you see other speakers, and that's helpful too. Where I always think of successful conferences where you see some speakers who where you see them, you think, all right, well, I must be doing okay because I see what they're good, but they're not. I must be in the right place. I belong. But also, you need a few speakers that make you say, I could never be that good. What is this? What does this person have? It's just magical. I don't understand how they get to be that good. So that kind of aspirational, the kind of people that make you want to go back to work and say, I'm not ready yet.
Yeah, I
That
think
was a long answer, my
no,
friend.
but it's beautiful because I think we all need that. Whether it's like even in the podcast now, whatever. Like I look at some people and you go, I just love the way they do it. You're kind of constantly studying. You never just put up your boots and go, yeah, I've got it. You have to always try to up your game. You always want to be better, and because I think it's just in our nature to do that.
Yeah, this is not like bagging groceries at the grocery store where once you've learned it, you've learned it.
So
Because there's levels of excellence, isn't there?
absolutely.
Even the top, like, athletes are such the famous stock answer. If Tiger Woods, the golfer, has a coach, maybe I should have a coach, because I'm not as good at my craft as Tiger Woods is at his. So maybe I need to do it. You need to go to see people that are better than you to remind you of that.
Exactly. So with the like the social media, then I know you've got the YouTube channel and you have some brilliant videos on that. But which social media do you find as a speaker help you and kind of get your message out there, get you that's worked for you?
Well, I would like you to tell me the answer to that question, because I don't know.
Well, we were actually talking before we recorded. I said I have something similar, like, because I said you don't know whether a video will get 10 views or it'll get 10,000. It just, I know you can use algorithms and you can just play around with the title and you can play around with the keywords and everything. To be honest, I mean that the problem with that is it's so much work in itself, and I think that when something takes off, it's like someone likes it and they share it, and that's how it actually starts
Right.
getting to build legs.
Well, yes, right, because that's your full-time job. It could be your full-time job doing A/B tests on YouTube and Instagram and whatever else. And I am definitely aware enough to say that having a massive, million followers on Instagram couldn't hurt my business. That would be good, right? But also, I wonder how much it would really help. Meaning, like, I worked for British Petroleum for 250 liters. What are the chances that anybody at British Petroleum would have seen my Instagram feed? I don't think that's that strong. And then, more amazing, it would be, what are the chances that the one person who is in charge of that event, who's been tasked with finding a speaker, is going to see my Instagram feed? It's astronomical, I think. So having like a massive following from the excuse me, having a massive following from the general public, I think would be better credibility. But also, it just makes me wonder, is it really worth it? Because that BP guy who hired me was not in TikTok, right? He wasn't scrolling through TikTok going, oh my gosh, I need this guy. So for me, the biggest thing that helped is I've had a website since the beginning of websites. I built my first website in 1998. And I think because of that, my website just has history. I think Google knows that I've been in this business a long time. So that has, everything I've invested in the website has been way more important than social media. And everything I've invested in my videos has been way more important than social media. Because what I want is when people hear about me, because somebody saw me somewhere else and said, oh, we saw Brad at an event, you ought to check him out. He'd be good for our event. Then they're not looking at Instagram. They're going to my website. So the video is key, and making sure they can find my website is the second key. But maybe I'm just lazy, dude. I don't know. Because Instagram just kills me. I have no interest in it. And the people who are great at Instagram, that's what they do. They spend all their time on it.
Yeah. No, I think it kind of loops back to what you said at the start, be just so good. And at the end of the day, your great speeches that are on YouTube, that's what's going to sell you. So if somebody comes across it, whereas the Instagram, I'm to say I stopped I have for most of the podcasts, the Instagram, and I stopped doing it. I started using the LinkedIn for a lot of stuff, because I think it's where the business circle kind of hang out.
Yeah.
And the YouTube as well. I mean, it's hit and miss. I mean, the Polish channel is over 1 million, but the other ones, they don't take off. And I think it is what it is, and I don't beat myself up. And like, one thing that I was talking to one guy, it was like, a lot of people are kind of into, whether it's the TikTok or any of these things, all the thumbs up and the hearts. It's like, how do I convert that to money? Because you can have 1 million followers and get 10 million thumbs up, and you can be broke. So I think you need to look at how you're converting this. Sometimes it's just getting them from one area to to look at your YouTube channel, but there's a lot of work involved. And, you know, unless you've got a team behind you, I think, yeah, not to spend too much time, and don't beat yourself up because, you know, you got 200 or 100 followers on Instagram or whatever, one of these other social media platforms.
I'm sure people who are experts at Instagram and TikTok and whatever have 20 reasons why I'm wrong. But yeah, it just feels like the effort spent to build that those channels, that's a tough, unless you're trying to do that on its own, like in order to get ad revenue on those channels. It just seems like a really tough way to build a speaking business. Where making sure you're like, if I was brand new, I wouldn't be doing that. I'd be speaking for free whenever possible, hoping that people in the audience would say, "Holy cow, this guy is good. I need to bring him in. I wonder how much he costs." That strikes me as just such way quicker way to build their business than say, "Hey, I put 4 things on Instagram today that went out to the who knows where."
Oh, absolutely. And finally, you know, we've gone into this crazy virtual world where you have to do a lot more. So I'm assuming over the last few years, you've had to do some of your work virtually. Have you any kind of tips and tricks that you've learned from that?
Oh man, that's such a that is a ball of that's a big can of worms right there. We're all learning, right? All of us are better talking to a camera now than we were at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm on that ship, right? I was just not so good at the beginning and I'm getting better at it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. But to me the hardest part is to play to the camera as though someone cares. Let me explain. Like you were talking about emceeing. So I had this job recently. I was very flattered. They hired me to be the MC for their 5.5 hour meeting. So their people were spread all over the planet, and every single portion of that day was pre-recorded, except for me, the MC, because they wanted to be live in case something went wrong. And then at the end, they were going to bring in the top 2 people, and I would lead them through a Q&A section. That means for 5.5 hours, I'm standing here in my studio that I built, looking at the camera. But here was what was so weird about it. There was no audience, meaning the only person that I was interacting with was a tech guy, because there's no gallery, there was no chat box, there was none of the things that we might rely on to know if anyone's listening. So literally, I'd have my guy Sam, he was the tech guy. I would hear him through my speakers. Brad, 5 seconds, 4, 3. And I say, "Hey, everybody, that was speaker number 4. Wasn't he great?" And then I maybe did a magic trick for the camera. And then I said, "Well, I know you're having fun. Let's keep it going. And here's the next guy." And then Sam would say, "All right, you're out." So that was 90 seconds. And it was the most bizarre thing. And I feel like that's what I learned over the pandemic, how to be on that camera and look at the camera as though I am actually talking to humans. When in fact, I'm wondering, is there anyone, is there anyone there? Because I have no idea. Really gives me so much respect for those news anchors and the morning show anchors where they're talking to the camera as though they're so bubbly. It's such a bizarre thing. And it's a little bit soul crushing, don't you think? Meaning, I've done keynotes where I stand here in my studio and I do an entire 45 minutes or hour, and I can't see anybody because of the way the tech works. The short story is, the larger the audience, the less of a chance you're going to have of ever interacting with anybody. With Zoom, for example, over 500 people, there's no gallery. But I can't remember exactly where I was going with this, but eventually you do this keynote and then you're done. And then with the live audience, people often might clap for you, or if you're lucky, they might even come up and acknowledge, "Oh, I was in the audience and I enjoyed that," or I was in the audience and you reminded me of something in my life and I wanted to tell you that story. That is so fun. But in the virtual thing, what kills me the most is it's over and then you just push end meeting and I walk into the kitchen and grab a cup of coffee, or like, it's so it doesn't feed your soul the same way that live audiences do.
I've I've done a humor speech with the Toastmasters on the Zoom, and what was so strange for me is because when you're doing it normally, you're kind of watching the audience and you know when to continue, because sometimes you could, you might assume they'll laugh for 2 seconds or they mightn't laugh at all, but you can adjust based on how they're. But when you're doing it and you can't see anyone's faces, it is so strange. It's a pity, because that's something that I didn't enjoy, to be honest with you. Like with the humor, it's great to get the feeling and just see people with the belly laughs and just feeling what you're giving them.
Yeah, it's hard. Plus, you don't know if it's funny, right? For those of you who are new to humor, here's how you know if something's funny. You say something, and if people laugh, it's funny. But if you don't know if they're laughing, you don't know if it's funny. So for that thing where I was an MC, I wrote some material and I was making jokes about their company and teasing the previous speaker, as we talked about earlier. Guess how successful it was. I don't know either. It's just gone. No idea if that stuff fell flat or not.
Yeah, the sad part about that is you could have had, half could be the best jokes ever, and people could have been on the ground laughing, and others they could have been cringing, going. And when you do another show, you could repeat the worst ones, and instead of actually knowing, okay, let's cut this out, and it's hard not getting feedback from them.
Well, the other thing that you touched on, one of the problems with virtual is you don't know how long they're laughing, so you don't know when to move on. But another thing is, I feel like we have to change our pacing and our energy level to match the audience. We've all seen those speakers who come out in front of an audience and they're just super high energy, and sometimes they lean forward and they might be talking fast, and they're just they've been told, hey, have a lot of energy, so they're doing their best to display that they have energy, but it's too much. It feels like, hey, slow down, Charlie, you're killing me, back up. So I feel like with our keynotes, we need to let the audience ease into who we are and start to know us. And once we have them, then we can go faster and we can have more energy. But it's really off-putting if we do that too much before they're ready. Or sometimes they're never ready. The entire time you have to sort of sit back on your heels and let them come to you. There's no role in that in virtual. You have no idea where they are, and like, do these people trust me yet? Are they eating what I'm feeding them? You just have no idea. So you kind of have to guess and do that middle ground. The people who are so good at it, I just really admire. Like, the people I admire most are the talk show hosts, late night television, because they were god awful at the beginning of the pandemic, and by the end they were good. And that was fascinating to watch, just how they handled no audience, no feedback, no nothing.
Excellent. Listen, Brad, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Well, I had fun too. You're a fun guy. And plus, you have the coolest accent. Everyone where I live wants to sound like you. Well, yeah, come and visit, people. My name's Brad Montgomery, and that's my website, bradmontgomery.com. Come and visit. I am on social. I'd love to see you. Type in Brad Montgomery. I'm not that hard to find. But I'm so grateful to be part of this podcast. And all you speakers out there, people need you. There are, wherever you live, there are people right now that would love to have you come and speak to them. Their audience would benefit from having your wisdom and your playfulness or whatever it is you bring. They just don't know about you yet, so don't give up.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brad.
What a fun day.
That's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com and BitChute and YouTube. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, subscribe. It all helps. Until next week, take care.